Alaikum everyone, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new. My name is Emma, and today we're going to be talking about, are you ready for marriage? Marriage is a big deal. A lot of people don't think it's that big of a deal. They think, oh, I love this person and I just want to be with them forever and we're going to get married and it's going to be roses and sunshine and rainbows. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not true. Marriage is a huge deal and a huge life decision. You are picking the person who, if you're Muslim watching this, you are picking the person who is half your deen. Half of your deen. Think about that for a second. Not only that, you're picking the person that you're going to spend the entire rest of your life with, inshallah. You need to pick wisely, unless you want to get a divorce. You've got to really think carefully and think wisely, and that's why I'm here, to help you guys figure out if you're ready for marriage. Now, I've had my share of difficulties when it comes to marriage because I think I wasn't ready when I got married, and I had a lot to learn. I knew my husband for 3 months before we got married. That means our introduction date to when we actually had our wedding, that was 3 months. And our wedding wasn't really a traditional wedding. We had a courthouse wedding. We couldn't afford a typical wedding at the time, so we just went with courthouse wedding. So I wasn't ready yet, and luckily, alhamdulillah, everything has turned out fine, has worked out wonderfully, and we're in a much better position. So I wanted to share the things that I learned on my journey to help you figure out if you're ready for marriage. The first thing you need to know before even talking to somebody about marriage is that marriage is a lot of work. Marriage is a choice. Now, that's going to sound a little weird. Marriage is a choice? What does that even mean? So, when you get married, you are making a choice to be with this person forever. When you are getting married, you are making a choice to be with this person for the rest of your life. But after you've made that choice, there's another choice that comes. And that is the choice that you have to make every day of if you want to make this work. Now, you're probably looking at me like, well, of course I want to make it work. What are you talking about? Well, let me tell you one thing. You're going to have a lot of difficulties. There's going to be arguments. There might be actual fights. This person is going to irritate you. And there are going to be times where you're going to want to throw in the towel, where you're going to be thinking to yourself, wow, wouldn't it be a lot easier if I could just live on my own? So you're making a choice every day to make this marriage work and to be with that person. It's not always an easy choice, but it's a choice that is very important. And you gotta work if you want to be married. You've got to put in the effort. Your marriage is only going to be good if you put in that effort. And if you're putting in all this effort and are not seeing a return, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe. Now, you don't want a divorce unless you've gone through all sorts of steps to figure out if you're ready for divorce. And there are videos about that you can look into. But this is one about marriage. So, now that you are aware that marriage is a ton of work, let's get into questions you should be asking yourself. The first question you should ask yourself is, can you share a space? So before you get married, you need to make sure that you're ready to share your living space with another person. When I got married, I was living in a studio apartment, and my husband moved into that studio apartment with me. And let me tell you, that was rocky. That was rocky. But when we got our 1-bedroom apartment, it was a little bit easier after that. It was actually a lot easier after that because we managed to be able to have our own space. But you might have other issues regarding space, sharing a space. And some of those issues come with cleanliness, for instance. If you are marrying somebody who's a bit messy and you're a neat freak, well, you're gonna have to figure things out. It doesn't mean that you can't be married to this person, but it means that you're gonna need to have that discussion about cleanliness, how often you're going to clean, and what your expectations are. Sharing a space also comes with sacrificing your alone time, or at least a lot of it. So it's important to figure out if you're ready to have that happen, and if you're also ready to figure out ways to get your own me time. Personally, I have the early mornings all to myself because my husband wakes up later than I do. So I have the morning to have my me time, and my husband has the late night to have his me time because I go to sleep crazy early. Crazy early. I just get tired really fast. I don't know what that's about. So figure out how you're going to get your me time, because if you are just constantly around one person all the time and you're not getting any space to yourself, you are going to go insane. COVID actually drove a lot of couples insane because they were suddenly forced to be together 24/7 and weren't able to get that me time. It doesn't mean that they weren't meant for each other, and it doesn't mean that they're not a good couple. It just means that they weren't getting that personal time that they craved. A major thing you need to consider, and not just consider, that you need to talk about, is finances. So that is the second thing. You need to talk about your finances. Now, what do I mean by talking about finances? You need to talk about spending. How much is too much? So what I mean by that is, if I'm gonna spend $50 or more, I consult with my husband. So I say, hey, I'm gonna spend $100 on this item. Are you okay with that? And he will do the same thing for me. He'll say, hey, there's an item that's like $200. Is it okay if I get it? Okay. Obviously, these prices are just made up numbers, but you get what I'm saying. If a price is over $50, we will consult each other on it. Make sure that the other person agrees that it's a good purchase, or we'll talk it out and figure out a compromise of some sort. Another thing to consider is what kind of bank account you want. First, you guys need to decide if you want separate bank accounts or a joint bank account, or kind of a combination where you each have a separate bank account, but you also have a household account where you put money for like rent and stuff. Personally, my husband and I have a shared bank account, so all of our finances are intertwined, but I know not everybody likes to do that. Not everybody wants to do that, and you need to have that conversation ahead of time to make sure that you guys are on the same page. If you are a person who likes to spend a lot of money, you need to talk with your partner about that and figure out if you're able to spend that kind of money. You need to talk about budgeting. You need to talk about how much you want to spend on groceries, on personal items, on hobbies. You have to talk about all of these things. If you don't, things are going to become difficult when you have an expensive hobby and your partner was not ready for that, and now you're spending all this money. Or your partner likes to shop, likes to buy all sorts of clothes or whatever, and you didn't know that and you weren't prepared to suddenly see $300 spent on clothing. So you guys need to talk about that, work out what works for you. Another thing that's good to talk about is kids. Do you want them? How many do you want? And when do you want them? So not everybody can have kids. Some people are infertile. Some people have genetic disorders. There are all sorts of reasons why a person might not want to have kids or can't have kids. And it's important to be upfront about that with your partner. So my husband and I have our own reasons why we want to wait for kids, and I'm not actually going to get into them because that's very personal, but we're not sure if we're going to have kids. We might not. It's really up to Allah at this point. Maybe I'll make a video with my personal reasons. If you would like a video on that, I can do that. Just leave a comment. I will not be getting into my husband's reasons because that is his business. A big thing though is, how will you raise your kids? You guys need to talk about this because it can be a tough one. And when I say it can be a tough one, I mean, getting into the nitty gritty of like, how are you going to handle punishments? How are you going to act when your kid does something that you don't want them to do? How are you going to respond to that? And you need to make sure that you're aligned with that. And that can even be things like your kid doesn't want vegetables. Well, are you going to force them to eat them? Or are you going to say, well, just have one bite and then you can be done. There you have to figure out how you're going to deal with the little things and the big things, such as, are you going to make sure modesty is a big deal for your children? Are you going to make sure that you teach your children how to pray? You need to go through all these things, and maybe, you should be doing those things in my opinion. But there are other things, like, for example, my husband is from Egypt and he speaks Arabic, and we've been talking, how do we want to teach our kids English and Arabic? And I've been focusing on learning Arabic so that if we are to have children, he really wants them to know Arabic, which makes sense. All his family's in Egypt. We want the kids to learn Arabic, and I want to know how to speak it so I can speak with everyone. And actually, one thing I want to throw in just for fun is naming traditions. Now, naming, you would think it's not a big deal, but for my husband, it actually was. So in Egyptian culture and a lot of Arab cultures, you have the first name, and then the middle name is the father's name, and then you can also have the grandfather's name, and then the family name, and you can keep going on if you want, but that's typically how it goes. So when I was talking to him about names, I was like, oh, I would like, this first name was pretty, and then I would go great with this middle name. And he was like, well, but for a middle name, it's my name, as in his name. And I was like, what do you mean? What if we have a girl? You have a male name. He was like, no, that's normal. That's how it works in Egypt. And that's important to me that I continue that tradition. And I thought about it, and I decided, you know what? Cool. If that's important to you, we're gonna do it. Another thing you need to focus on is something that sounds a little funny, but it's how to argue. And what I mean by that is you need to figure out how you're gonna handle disagreements, because they're gonna come up. You might even have full-fledged fights. I hope you don't, but it could happen. And arguments, disagreements are definitely going to come up. And you need to figure out how you're going to handle it when it happens. For my husband and I, we need to take breaks because we both get emotional in different ways. Our emotions express differently, but we do get emotional. So a lot of times we have to tap out. We have to say, hey, I do want to continue this conversation. It's important. I understand that you're very upset and this matters a lot to you, but I need to take 5 minutes, or I need to step out of the apartment for a minute, and when I come back we can talk about it again, because I'm afraid I'm going to say something I regret. And yeah, so a really important thing in arguments is to take ownership of where you may have gone wrong and think about that as well. But yeah, figure out how you're going to disagree. And if things aren't going well, like for instance, if I were to say, hey, I need 5 minutes to my husband, and he said, no, we're going to talk right now, I would say, hey, do you remember how we agreed beforehand that if I need 5 minutes, if I need to take a 5-minute break, we agreed that we would take that 5-minute break and then come back to the conversation. So what's going on? Why can't I take that 5-minute break? You can do that. So have these pre-made plans ahead of time when you're calm and collected so that you know how to approach these disagreements. So if you don't have the answers to some of the questions I've brought up, or you're not sure about certain things that I've brought up, you're probably not ready yet to get married. So what I want you to do is consider these things. And then once you have the answers to these things, you might be on the road to success. You also do want to factor in age. The brain doesn't actually fully mature until age 25, and that's for men and women. There's a misconception that women's brains mature faster. That's not true. The brain isn't fully developed until age 25. That doesn't mean you can't get married before 25. My husband was 23. I was 25. If you're marrying somebody significantly younger or significantly older than you, you may be at a place where your vision for your future doesn't line up. So for instance, let's say we have a 27-year-old who is interested in marrying a 21-year-old. And this 21-year-old in this scenario wants to marry them as well. Well, the 21-year-old is just starting out, right? And the 27-year-old might be ready to have kids, might be ready to move into a house. And the 21-year-old might be saying, hey, wait, I want to travel. I want to do X, Y, and Z and live out my 20s for a bit, enjoy them. And the 27-year-old is like, well, I've already lived my 20s. I'm ready for the next step. So you really need to consider age. I know everyone says age is just a number, but I think that's only true when you're more in your 30s. I think in your 20s and younger, age is not just a number. Age is very important to consider. So my final note that I want to end on is that you should not allow yourself to be pressured into marriage. If somebody is trying to force you into marriage, whether that's your partner or another person like a family member or a friend, that's a problem, and you should take that as a giant red flag. Okay, that's not okay. Do not allow yourself to be pressured into marriage, and that's easier said than done, I'm aware, but please only get married when you feel ready, and only get married if you want to get married. Not everybody wants to get married. And that's, some people have a huge issue with that. They want their kids to get married. They want all of that for their family. But some people, it's just not for them. And if marriage is not for you, that's okay. It really is okay. I hope this video was at all helpful, and I hope that you guys have a great day or night or whatever time it is for you. Go ahead and click the like button down below. That really helps my channel out, and you can go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and join the family. My Instagram is right here, and you can go ahead and follow me on there for updates on my life and just some fun photos. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Bye!